how you think, very different part of who you are as a person? Well, I've had a question in my mind for many years, and that is, how can you speed up learning? Now, this is an interesting question because if you speed up learning, you can spend less time at school. And if you learn really fast, you probably wouldn't have to go to school at all. Now, when I was young, school was sort of okay, but I found quite after that school got in the way of learning. So I had this question in my mind: how do you learn faster? And this began when I was very young. When I was 11 years old, I wrote a letter to researchers in the Soviet Union asking about hypnopedia. This is sleep learning, where you get a tape recorder, you put it beside your bed, and it turns on in the middle of the night, and you are sleeping. And you are supposed to be learning from this a good idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, but hypnopedia did open the doors for research in other areas, and we've had incredible discoveries about learning that began with the first question. I went on from there to become passionate about psychology, and I have been involved in psychology in many different ways for the rest of my life up until this point. In 1981, I took myself to China, and I decided that I was going to be native level in Chinese inside 2 years. Now, you need to understand, in 1981, everybody thought Chinese was really difficult, and that the Western could study for 10 years or more and never really get very good at it. And I also went in with a different idea, which was taking all of the conclusions from psychological research to that point and applying them to the learning process. What was really cool was that in 6 months I was fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and I took a little bit longer to get up to native. But I looked around and I saw all of these people from different countries struggling terribly with Chinese. I saw Chinese people struggling terribly to learn English and other languages. And so my question got refined down to: how can you help a normal adult learn a new language quickly, easily, and effectively? Now, this is a really important question in today's world. We have massive challenges with environment. We have massive challenges with social dislocation, with wars, all sorts of things going on, and if we cannot communicate, we are really going to have difficulty solving these problems. So we need to be able to speak others' languages. This is really important. The question then is, how do you do that? Well, it's actually really easy. You look around for people who can already do it. You look for situations where it's already working, and then you identify the principles and apply them. It's called modeling, and I've been looking at language learning and modeling language learning for about 15 to 20 years now. And my conclusion, my observation from this is that any adult can learn a second language to fluency inside 6 months. Now, when I say this, most people think I'm crazy. This is not possible. So let me remind everybody of the history of human progress. It's all about expanding our limits. In 1950, everybody believed that running 1 mile in 4 minutes was impossible. And then Roger Bannister did it in 1956. And from there it got shorter and shorter. 100 years ago, everybody believed that heavy stuff doesn't fly, except it does, and we all know this. How does heavy stuff the material using principle that we have learned for observing nature, birds in this case. And today we've gone even further. We've gone even further so you can fly a car. You can buy one of these for a couple, 100,000 US dollars. We now have cars in the world that fly. And there is a different way to fly which we've learned from Secretless. So all you need to do is copy what a flying squirrel does. Build a suit coat, a wingsuit, and off you go. You can fly like a squirrel. Now most people, a lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people think they can draw. However, there are some key principles, 5 principles that you can apply to learning to draw, and you can actually learn to draw in 5 days. So, if you draw like this, you learn this principle for 5 days and apply them, and after 5 days, you can draw something like this. Now, I know this is true because that was my first drawing, and after 5 days of applying these principles, that was what I was able to do. And I looked at this and I went, wow, so that's how I look like when I'm concentrating so intensely that my brain is exploding. So, anybody can learn to draw in 5 days, and in the same way, with the same logic, anybody can learn second language in 6 months. How? There are 5 principles and 7 actions. So, what are the 5 principles that you need to pay attention to? First, the 4 words: attention, meaning, relevance, and memory. And this interconnect in very, very important ways, especially when you are talking about learning. Come with me on a journey through the forest. You go on a walk through the forest and you see something like this. Little marks on a tree. Maybe you pay attention, maybe you don't. You go another 50 meters, you can see this. You should be paying attention. Another 50 meters, if you haven't been paying attention, you see this. And at this point, you are paying attention. And you've just learned that is important. It's relevant because it means this. And anything that is related, any information related to your survival is stuff that you are going to pay attention to, and therefore you're going to remember it. If it is related to your personal goals, then you are going to pay attention to it. If it's relevant, you are going to remember it. So, the first principle for learning a language is focus on language content that is relevant to you, which brings us to tools. We master tools by using tools, and we learn tools the fast where they are relevant to us. So let me share a story. A keyboard is a tool. Typing Chinese a certain way. There are methods for this. That's a tool. I had a challenge many years ago. Who went to night school Tuesday night, Thursday night, 2 hours each time, practicing at home. She spent 9 months and she didn't learn to type Chinese, and one night we had a crisis. We had 48 hours to deliver a training manual in Chinese, and she got the job, and I can guarantee you in 48 hours she learned to type Chinese because it was relevant, it was meaningful, it was important. She was using a tool to create value. So the second principle for learning a language is to use your language as a tool to communicate right from day one. As a kid does, when I first arrived in China, I didn't speak a word of Chinese. And on my second week, I got to take a train ride overnight. I spent 8 hours sitting the dining car, talking to one of the guards on the train, he took an interest in me for some reason, and he just chatted all night in Chinese, and he was drawing pictures and making movements with his hands and facial expression, and piece by piece I understand more and more. But what's really cool was 2 weeks later, when people were talking Chinese around me, I was understanding some of this, and I hadn't even made any effort to learn that. What had happened, I observed it that night on the train, which brings us to third principle. When you first understand the message, then you will experience the language unconsciously, and this is really well documented now. It's something called comprehensible input. There is 20 or 30 years of research of this. Stephen Krashen, a leader in the field, has published all sorts of these different studies, and this is just from one of them. The purple bars show the percent different tests for language. The purple people were people who handled by grammar and formal study. The green ones are the ones who learn by comprehensible input, so comprehension works. Comprehension is key, and language learning is not about accumulating lots of knowledge. In many ways, it's about psychological training. A woman I know from Taiwan did great in English at school. She got A grades all the way through. We went through college, grades, went to the US, and found she couldn't understand what people were saying, and people started asking her, "Are you deaf?" And she was English deaf, because we have filter in our brain that filter in the sounds that we are familiar with, and they filter out the sounds of languages that we are not. And if you can't hear it, you won't understand it. If you can't understand, you are not going to learn it. So you actually have to be able to hear the sounds. And there are ways to do that, but it's psychological training. Speaking takes muscle. You've got 43 muscles in your face. You have to coordinate those in a way that you make sounds that another people will understand. If you've ever done the new sport for a couple of days and you know how your body feels, heart, if your face is hearty, you're doing it right. And final principle is state. Psychological state. If you are sad, angry, worried, upset, you are not going to learn. Period. If you are happy, relaxed, in a alpha brain state, curious, you are going to learn really quickly. And very specifically, you need to be tolerant of ambiguity. If you are one of those people who needs to understand 100% every word you are hearing, you will go nuts, because you'll be incredibly upset all the time because you are not perfect. If you are comfortable with getting some, not getting some, just paying attention to what you do understand, you are going to be fine, relaxed, and you will be learning quickly. So, based on this 5 principles, what are the 7 actions? So, there are 5 principles that you need to work with. 7 actions. If you do any of them, you are going to improve. And remember, these are things under you counteract the learner. Do them all, and you are going to be fluent in a second language in 6 months. Thank you.